How's it going, guys? Cody, guys, back again, dropping out another video. Right, guys, sorry I didn't drop any vlogs yesterday. I found myself with some downtime after a busy few weeks, guys, right? I've literally thought yesterday I took full advantage, so I apologise about that. I'm going to jump back on it, guys, right? I'm going to be filming very shortly in about half an hour, 45 minutes, so I'm going to get this vlog done, get a shower and get out the door. I'm involved in this story. It's about my former prison, which is Sodexo ran Cat B, Forest Bank here in Salford, private prison or prison for profit, right? It's a featured story. It's a very, very long story. There's a lot of different stories coming out in the story. It's a featured piece, guys, right? This will run and run. I'm a very small part of it as a former prisoner of the prison, obviously. So the headline reads, "Deaths, escapes and drugs hidden in pot noodles. Is this a prison in crisis?" Link in the description, guys, right? There's been violence, officers in the dock, and more drug and phone seizures than at any other prison. Beth a Bit investigates what's going wrong at Forest Bank Prison. Violence and an escape, officers in the dock, and drugs hidden inside pot noodles. Is this a prison in crisis? HMP Forest Bank has been at the centre of a spate of nasty incidents over the last 12 months. And it has more drug and phone seizures than at any other prison in the country. It's the third year in a row, guys. Forest Bank Prison has had the highest number of drug seizures and phone seizures in prisons in England and Wales. But perhaps most shockingly, the cases involving prison officers who themselves have turned to crime, or in one such case are facing a serious allegation. In under one year, a prison officer has been jailed for smuggling mobile phones. 2 security guards are facing jail after admitting stealing and selling DVDs and games from the jail. Violence and drugs, especially spice, are rife, and the government has reported more drug seizures at Forest Bank than at any other prison in England and Wales. One woman even told the Manchester Evening News she was targeted by a prisoner who tried to get her to smuggle items into the prison for him after meeting him on the dating website Plenty of Fish. It's the latest in a string of incidents which has raised serious questions over security at the Salford jail. We've also heard from staff, ex-staff, prisoners and relatives of inmates who are worried about what is going on behind the gates of the privately run jail. One inmate spent 6 months in hospital after he was set on fire in his cell. Meanwhile, an officer was knocked unconscious during a ferocious and unprovoked assault by a prisoner as he took him his lunch. Salford MP Rebecca Long Bailey has told the Manchester Evening News her office has received complaints about the prison from all across the country. She's described events at the Salford jail, which houses Category B and Category C inmates and young offenders, as an example of how justice on the cheap has failed. All of this points to one question: is this a prison in crisis? Overworked, underpaid and under-supported. This is a prison officer, guys, right, that currently works there. I'm not paid enough to put up with this abuse. That was the conclusion of one Forest Bank officer after he was attacked in the jail. He was knocked unconscious in October last year in a ferocious and unprovoked assault by inmate Dorian Griffiths. It says it was a ferocious and unprovoked attack. He had mental health issues, guys, right? And it was a Section 47 assault. That's what he got wrapped up for. Griffiths was last week handed a further 6 months in custody after admitting actual bodily harm during a hearing at Manchester Magistrates Court. The court heard how the officer had attended a job interview in the days following the attack and has been 50-50 about leaving Forest Bank to take the new role. However, the violent attack by Griffiths made up his mind. "After the assault, I was sure I'm going to leave the prison service," he said in an impact statement read out in the court. "I'm not paid enough to put up with this abuse." Another officer at the jail told us, "Staff are overworked, underpaid and not supported by managers. Terrible pay, terrible sick pay, poor health benefits and employing young people to work in prison who have little life experience is all part of the problem," he said. "I feel like I was not properly supported and that prisoners seem to have more privileges than staff. The people at the bottom get constant abuse and there's really a high turnover of staff. Staff are physically assaulted and have even had excrement thrown at them. Serving inmates and staff have contacted the MEN to complain that officers are overworked and struggle to control the inmates. The union community, which is members at Forest Bank, has called for better pay, training and increased staffing. We put the officers' claims to Sodexo, who they are committed to supporting staff. The company has previously insisted that the prison is not understaffed. As a former prisoner, yes it is. Why then is it such a problem with drugs? Spice in pot noodles. Spice gets in loads of ways. Planted in tubs of protein powder, which go into the prison gym undetected, is one way. Another is bringing it into the prison in a pot noodle. They steam off the lid and take out the contents, refill it with drugs, and then glue the lid back on, as source told us. We put the allegations to Sodexo, who declined to give a direct answer. That tells you everything you need to know, guys. Nonetheless, the figures speak for themselves. In 2017-2018, there were 537 drug seizures at Forest Bank, more than at any other prison in England and Wales. Psychoactive substances, formerly known as legal highs, such as spice and black mamba, were the most common find, being confiscated 203 times. Cannabis was discovered 140 times, cocaine was confiscated 16 times, and there was 4 heroin seizures made. It's the third year in a row the Salford prison has had the highest number of drug seizures. On the hand, it's good to know that the contraband items are being recovered, but on the other, it raises concern about the ease in which drugs are getting into the jail and can be found behind bars. The effects of Forest Bank's drugs issues have been catastrophic for some. Jordan Hyam, 20, spent weeks in intensive care after taking spice and collapsing at jail. He was on remand at the prison at the time. An image of Jordan battling for his life in hospital was handed out to inmates at Forest Bank in the wake of the incident in a bid to scare them off the spice. At the time, a prison service spokesman spoke of introducing mandatory drugs testing, increasing sniffer dogs and cell searches across the whole prison estate, and strengthening laws around new psychoactive substances to crack down on drugs in the jails. Months after Jordan was taken ill, Forest Bank started distributing a harm reduction leaflet. This is my leaflet, this guys, I sent this to him, amongst residents of the prison, instructing them on the safest way to take drugs if they ignored advice not to. Inmates were warned about chopping up powders finely before snorting, not sharing needles, only using one drug at a time, and details how to look after fellow inmates who have overdosed. There was even a diagram on how to put somebody in the recovery position. Prison bosses at the time said staff worked hard to keep drugs out, but they have a duty of care to prisoners and such provide support and advice. Pardon me, guys. In October 2016, an investigation was launched after a leaked footage revealed the violence and humiliation sparked by spice use in Forest Bank, including naked prisoners pretending to be dogs. Prison bosses launched an investigation and said staff work hard to successfully stop illicit items from entering the prison. Well, how can that be when they've had the highest drug seizures in prisons in England and Wales, 3 years on the bounce? But it's not the drugs that are getting in. It's not just the drugs that are getting into prisons. Phones are getting in as well. And then there's one here from a girl. I met a serving prisoner on Plenty of Fish. One woman told the Manchester Evening News she was targeted by a prisoner who tried to get her to smuggle items into the prison for him after she met him on the dating site Plenty of Fish. By the time I found out he was in prison, I was in too deep. He made out I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The woman who asked not to be named said, then he started to ask me to do things I wasn't comfortable doing. I said no. He said, go fuck yourself. Girls need to be careful. She went on. When they're in their cells, they're completely different. The minute you don't want to do what they do, they change. What? Right. The minute you don't want to do what they want, they change. Right. Got it. Sorry, guys. Sodexo admit that contraband mobile phones have been found inside Forest Bank and insist they're working down to crack down on all of contraband. But even staff have been implicated. I was made to do it. This is a story about Laney Martin. In July, prison officer Laney Martin was jailed after hiding contraband, mobile phones, SIM cards, chargers and tobacco in the waistline of her gym pants under her uniform and smuggling them into Forest Bank. Another 498 mobile phones and 211 SIM cards were seized from inmates in the year 2017 to 2018, the highest numbers of seizures in the country. In Laney Martin's case, she told the court she was made to do it. She's now on the other side of the bars, serving 14 months after pleading guilty to 10 charges of conveying prohibited articles into her workplace. And she's just one of a number of staff who have been investigated by police in recent months. 2 security managers have been convicted of stealing thousands of pounds worth of goods from Forest Bank. Security analyst Anthony Bradbury and security manager Carl Byron offered to carry out searches in areas of the prison where CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray discs, Xbox and PlayStation's games were being stored. The items were brought into the prison as part of a legitimate prison industries contract for inmates to earn money repackaging the products. Bradbury, 30, and Byron, 37, both from Salford, used their jobs as a chance to steal. They filled holdalls with around 100 items at a time before simply walking out of the jail with their haul, a scam which lasted 3 years. Their accomplice, Charlie Corrigan, 25, from Bury, then sold the items online. Bradbury and Byron, who were part of the prison's corruption prevention team, are pleaded guilty to theft and converting criminal property. So they was part of the prison's corruption prevention team, guys, right? And they was stealing stuff from inside the prison. Right. Corrigan pleaded guilty to conveying criminal property. All three are due to be sentenced next month. They should be expecting custodial sentences. They should be throwing the book at. All this year, other officers have been subject to action for separate disciplinary issues. One officer was accused of having a romance with a sex offender she met on a wing. Right, she met on a H2. The non-swinging Forest Bank is H2. One officer was accused of having a romance with a sex offender she met on a wing. She was suspended when the prison launched an investigation and a specialist police unit looked into it. She later resigned. Then at Easter, an officer was suspended after 2 prisoners overpowered him, stole his keys and escaped from his cell before trying to free a 3rd inmate. Weeks later, another officer was suspended after an inmate hid in a laundry cupboard. He was gone for hours, but no one noticed. He was missing until he gave himself up. Sodexo declined to comment further on their cases. Surprise, surprise. Right. Why do you put up with all that when I could put £1,000 in your pocket for bringing in a little bit of powder? Right. So what would possess a prison officer to commit a crime themselves? Former officer David Whittam recalls working long hours for low wages. He left the jail in 2003, but insists are echoed by a former prisoner who was released last year. Dave said inmates tried to bribe him many times, though he never accepted the offers. They would find you on a bad day at a time when you were clearly angry or frustrated or disappointed in the way you were being treated by your bosses, which was often, he said. They would present themselves as the voice of sympathy and understanding, tell you that you were right to feel that way. Did they ask you, like, why do you put up with all that for so little pay when I could put £1,000 in your pocket for bringing in a bit of powder? They're essentially trying to groom officers while simultaneously stoking your discontent for your management and employers. It's done very casually, as they're clearly fishing for those officers who can be tempted into taking a risk. Dave says drugs were smuggled in by relatives, prisoners, and occasionally by officers. Scenarios all supported by prosecutions over the years. One of the earliest memories was working in visits and observing on cameras as a visitor pulled his penis out of his trousers, removed the wrap of drug from under his foreskin, palmed it to the inmate who then swallowed it with the intention of defecating it out later and consuming it, he said. The former officer once discovered a 5-gallon container of hooch on a wing. 5 gallons, man. I'd be pissed for a year on that. If you can't find a 5-gallon container, then how is it to find a wrap of drugs, he says. It's an impossible job for them to find even a fraction of the contraband located on any of the wings. Former inmate Cody Lachey, says the majority of prison officers are hard-working and honest, but he says young and experienced officers can be easy to manipulate. They are putting young men and women on the landings with no life experience. Convicts are very manipulative and it's a game of cat and mouse, he says. At Forest Bank, the freedom is fantastic, but staff corruption is also a problem. Because the staff are more friendly, you can manipulate certain officers. You might bump into them in the supermarket, or obviously you're talking on the out. You might be able to bump into the supermarket or know them from home. They are locking up former friends. To be honest, I think a lot of corruption is just to top up the wages. Cody, who worked as an inmate cleaner before his release in 2007, says, I feel sorry for the officers. Not all of them, guys. There's some very good officers at Forest Bank. Anyone that's been in the bank will know. I feel sorry for the officers. The wage doesn't reflect the dangers they face on a daily basis. I stick to that. They are social workers, mental health workers. They are cutting people down from hanging attempts, acting as first aiders and firefighters. They do the job to the best of their ability, but they have got low morale. The pay doesn't warrant them going above and beyond. Prisons should be places of rehab and reform, but they are full of anger, debt, violence, intimidation and despair. People have never taken drugs, go in there and come out addicts. This guy was beaten into a coma. We live in 21st century Britain. This is supposed to be a civilised country, one parent told us. Back in April, he was horrified when he received a phone call from a prison chaplain telling him that his son has been attacked at the jail and was in a critical condition. The 23-year-old, who was on remand for theft, had been hit around the head with a television, suffering a brain injury before being put in an induced coma. He also suffered 2 fractured cheekbones, a fractured eye socket, broken ribs, a bleed on the brain, a torn earlobe and lip, and bruising to every inch of his body. In a separate incident in January, shocking footage emerged which showed a prisoner being brutally attacked in his cell. The guy that he's referring to about that was attacked in his cell was a sex offender guy that went into general population, and he was filled in. Both incidents were referred to the police, but Sodexo again declined to comment further. Surprise, surprise. The same month, the prisoner had to be rushed to hospital after reportedly setting himself on fire at a time when it was claimed prisoners were confined to their cells on lockdown because of staff shortages. His current condition is not known, but Sodexo says he is no longer in their care shortly after the incident. Right, I know who this guy is, guys, right? I'm not going to mention his name, but he was in the Wythenshawe Hospital in the Burns unit. He's no longer there, guys. I know that for a friend. People may feel they have limited sympathy for prisoners, but at the very least, prisoners have a duty to keep the residents of their jails safe, clean, and fed. Prisons is supposed to be a place where inmates are rehabilitated. Rehabilitation is a made-up word, guys. Simple as that. Being locked up and deprived of your freedom and civil liberties is the punishment. Not everyone in prison has committed a crime. Some of the inmates at Forest Bank on remand are awaiting trials for crimes they may be acquitted of. Campaigning charity Prison Reform Trust say that the latest catalogue of incidents is a cause for concern. Director Peter Dawson said these are worrying problems at HMP Forest Bank and are also seen in many other prisons. These include both public and private. There's no neat dividing line. The prison's last inspection in 2016 was unusually positive for the establishment of this type. It would need the detail and rigour of a full inspection to say whether things have changed, but it would come as no surprise if the chief inspector decided if he returned to Forest Bank sooner rather than later. The evidence accumulated is obviously a cause for concern. We also put the latest catalogue of incidents to the POA, the Prison Officers Association, a union which represents prison officers. They said they would be calling for a full independent review if Forest Bank was a public prison. The union spokesman said these allegations are shocking and the Chief Inspector of Prisons should look into this considering the recent urgent notification at Birmingham, the privately run prison, which is to be renationalised. Prisons across the estate are in a mess due to staff shortages and lack of experience. This seems worse than most on the face of it. We'll be calling for a full independent review if it was public. Officers need better pay, less violence, and fair training. Community. The trade union, which represents officers at Forest Bank, says staff at both public and private prisons often feel disenfranchised. Justice sector organiser Tiffany Gills says officers may feel disenfranchised about lack of training, lack of wages, lack of support. These issues are significant. We must continue to challenge companies and the government to ensure better conditions are all in place. Community has launched its Safer Justice Sector campaign calling for reduction of violence against staff, better pay and recognition, fair training and a career development and a minimum standard in contract. Tiffany says chronic underfunding and a lack of proper training are the most pertinent issues in prisons today. The Prisons Minister has announced investment of £10 million for the safety and security of prisons, but that's only for the bottom 10, that guys, anyway. We don't want the government to allocate contracts to whoever 99, 69, fucking jot a flake in that, fucking zap lolly, fucking screwball lolly. Right, so let's get into it anyway. So we don't want the government to allocate contracts to whoever can run jails for the cheapest. We need the correct levels of resources to run all prisons to the same standard. All assaults on staff have gone up year on year. We believe there should be the correct level of training, education and staffing to ensure the risks are minimised. They need the same things for prisoners, guys, as well. Do you know what I mean? A union spokesman said years of cuts and underinvestment from government have meant too many prison officers do not feel safe at work. The number of assaults on staff has been steadily rising in recent years, with our members across the UK bearing the brunt of the prison safety crisis. Justice on the cheap has failed and must end. So after a year of chaos in which the prisons hit the headlines at least once a month, what is the Ministry of Justice and Sodexo doing to crack down on crime, improve conditions for staff and ensure the best possible environment for rehabilitation? Although Forest Bank is run by a private firm, all inmates are prisoners of the state. So if the MEN put all these matters to the MOJ, but they declined to comment and directed us to Sodexo, who said prisons are a challenging environment to manage with violence, drugs and mobile phones, constant issues common across the whole estate. We are committed to supporting our staff in the excellent job they do, both stopping illicit items from getting into the prison and working with prisoners to address their behaviour to break the cycle of reoffending. That last part about working with prisoners to address their behaviour to break down the cycle of reoffending, nonsense. Whereas an individual falls short of the standards expected of them, they are robust and fair procedures are in place to deal with this. Salford MP Rebecca Long-Bailey has called for the government to take action to resolve the chaos in the prison system. She said, "It is extremely shocking to hear of the many issues at Forest Bank, some of which have been raised to me directly by relatives of inmates worried about their safety. Their concerns have been ongoing for well over 12 months and show no signs of improvement. Private prisons are in dire state of affairs and the ongoing issues at Forest Bank are clear evidence of that. The drug epidemic and widespread violence between prisoners and staff can't continue. The strain on staff across the prison service is immense, and understaffing and overworking can have a damaging effect on both staff and prisoners. The protection of staff must be the priority to ensure safety and security." That should also extend to the prisoners as well. Forest Bank, motherfucker. Right. Forest Bank must urgently address the concerns that have been raised, and the Secretary for State for Justice must act immediately to resolve the chaos in our prison system. Labour have already announced it will bring in prison maintenance contracts in-house, and that under a Labour government there will be no private prisons. To attempt to deliver justice on the cheap has failed and must end. The deprivation of liberty from human beings should no longer be seen as profiteering exercise. I agree. That's the story, guys. There's my little mug in it. There's my little mug. So, right, guys, the story is a big story. It's taken me nearly 22 minutes to get through, guys. There's just the headline of the story. I'll put a link in the description below, guys, right? My battery's running low, and I've got to get a quick shower and get out the door. Let me know what you think about the video, guys. The thing is, with anyone that's been in the... I'm a prisoner, and I stick up for prisoners. That's what I do. But there's some very, very good officers at Forest Bank. Very good. There's some dickheads, but there's some very, very good officers at Forest Bank for the most. 95%, 90% of officers are top draw. Decent. In any other walk of life, you go for a pint with them, right? Do you know what I mean? But you're in prison, and that's the way it is. Like I say, there's good and bad, yeah. But when I went to Strangeways, right, public prison, right, nothing positive to say about the staff. Forest Bank, they've got personalities. You can have a laugh, sense of humour. You know what I mean, there's some very good officers there, and like I say, they are badly treated. They are badly paid for the job that they do. Like I say, they're cutting people down. They're doing first aid. They're putting out fires in cell fires. Like acting as like go-betweens, trying to defuse situations, dealing with violence, dealing with app books. You know what I mean? There's not enough hours in the day for them, right? The social workers, the mentors, the mental health nurses. They try, not all of them, because some are better than others, but they do the job. Do you know what I mean? And like I say to you guys, if we had better officers, a better quality of officers that actually cared about the prisoners more and stuff like that, and was more proactive in looking after prison. Young staff, guys, right, are just... They're easy to manipulate. They've got no life experience. You're putting them on wings with highly manipulative masters of corruption and manipulation prisoners. And they fall victim to it, these young officers, guys. Wet behind the ears. On that note, guys, 23 minutes, one of my longest vlogs ever. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about the story. Link in the description. Cody out.